Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were a couple of us fulfilling our duties as the co-chairs of the Commonwealth Prayer Breakfast this morning, so a little bit of a busy morning. I appreciate, and I will endeavor to be brief and get us back on a time track. Just a couple statistics, and these are not Jesse Topper opinions. These are facts from the state police, and I really won't add any more comment. Annual firearm sales in Pennsylvania have more than doubled from the years 2006 to 2016. During that time, all violent crimes are down almost 25%. Violent firearm offenses are down almost 30%. In terms of what I wanted to talk about a little bit today was school safety. My wife is the front desk secretary at the elementary school that both of my boys attend. So I understand what that means if there's ever any kind of an event at that school. It will be would be the worst day ever for the Topper household, as it has been the worst day ever for households that have had to deal with those tragedies. A few weeks before the Parkland shooting, I was scheduled to go speak to schools in my district. I try and do that whenever we're not in session for a couple weeks and talk to government classes, high schools, middle schools, and those were on schedule before the tragic events occurred. So when I showed up the next week, obviously that was the talk. Everyone wanted to talk about school safety. What does it mean? What was interesting to me was the dialogue between myself, between students and teachers, from everything ranging from teachers carrying firearms to having security in the buildings to improve security in terms of scanners, metal detectors, which in our neck of the woods in rural Pennsylvania, you don't see at any schools. We talked about the safety of school buses in Israel, where Israeli Special Forces actually accompanies the kids on the bus. What would that mean to get on the bus with an Army Ranger in America? What I found is that sometimes down here, when we see emotional issues, when we see what we would consider controversial issues, we tend to be slow to talk about them openly. Everybody's afraid of saying the wrong thing, possibly saying something that ends up on the front page of a paper somewhere. The dialogue with the kids reminded me that we have to talk about these issues. Those were great dialogues those days, and I was very impressed with the maturity of young people who, even in the midst of talking about their own security, realized that sometimes improvement in perceived security means a loss of freedom. They see it when you go to the airport and take off your belt and your shoes and stand in front of a scanner and let the government go through your things without any reason to, just because you're there. And they understand what those would look like in a school setting. They start to understand what that looks like in real life and why we have a Constitution and why there are certain rights. As the son of a history teacher, I love history, and I love reading about our founding fathers. Those were individuals who lived under tyranny. They had a different perspective than perhaps we do, and it's probably impossible for us to understand exactly what they were going through, the tyranny that they lived under. But when they set forth the Constitution, I believe in my mind that they weren't setting it forth for that day, for that time. They were truly setting it forth for the future, that any governments that would follow, even though they might not experience what they experienced, would need to have these rights in place. It's the way I look at not just the Second Amendment, but every right guaranteed to us in the Bill of Rights. And so I guess my comments today would simply be this: as we look through all of these possible solutions when it comes to school safety, when it comes to violence of any kind, we need to keep in mind that when the government starts telling others, their own people, what they need, quote, need to protect themselves, we go down a road that I don't believe our founders wanted us to go down. And not just because they lived in a day of muskets and cannons, but because they had lived under government tyranny in the past and never wanted to see it again, certainly not for the new nation that they were creating. So those are some of my, as Thomas Sowell would say in his articles, random thoughts for the day, and I appreciate Chairman and all the members of this committee of their attentiveness and their diligence over the past few weeks. Thank you.